What's up guys, Original Dobo. Welcome back to Phones, Drones, and Tech. If you're new here, consider hitting that subscribe button at the end of the video. Today we're doing our first impression of this. This is the Parrot Anafi, and the biggest question I have about this drone is it enough? Okay, that was like a really bad try at a pun, but the big question I have is this going to be enough to compete with the likes of the Mavic Air? It comes in at $699, which is pretty expensive. There's no obstacle avoidance. It does have some neat parlor tricks, but is it going to be enough to get your hard-earned cash? I'm going to give you my first impressions and let you know what I think of this and whether or not you should go out and buy this. Stay tuned. So first things first, we have to go ahead and unbox this. And by the way, this is going to be a very fast unboxing. The box is pretty straightforward, clean packaging all the way through. You open the box up, drones in the pouch, ready to go. You get your controller. You also get spare props with a tool to take them on and off, and some documents and literature. Inside the case, you'll find the micro USB-C cable. There is no charger included. You can basically plug that USB-C cable into any charger that you have and it'll charge up the drone. That's one benefit of USB-C. Now the drone unfolds pretty straightforward, which I do like. It's basically you fold to the front, you fold to the rear, and you're done. Now the pull mechanism that actually opens the arms isn't very far. It's a pretty shallow travel, so don't yank on it. You'll probably snap them off. But when you do open them, you'll get a nice satisfying click, and that'll let you know that the arms are locked in place. Now, first impression when I initially grabbed this thing and started holding it, I was a little disappointed because it was so light and it felt very cheap, but I think a lot of that's really in part to what material that this drone is made up of. It is carbon fiber infused glass. It is really light at 320 grams, and that's one of the things that Parrot is boasting, that this drone is very, very light. And I'll have to agree with them, it definitely is. The controller is pretty awesome. I like the ergonomics on the controller. It's a different controller. It's not like anything I've ever seen before. You open the controller up and it immediately powers up. If I had to compare it to anything, I would compare it to that of an Xbox One controller. Ergonomics are good. However, there is one little flaw with this, and that's if you use a case on your phone, it's going to be pretty hard to get it positioned correctly. Now, I use an iPhone 10 with my flights, and using the case is sort of a big deal for me because if I break this phone, I'm at $1,000 and I don't want to do that. Now, taking the phone off of this, it does work pretty well. Power in the drone is a 2700 milliamp hour battery. It's good for 25 minutes of flight time. In my testing, I'm able to get about 18 minutes, which is relatively good or close enough to what they have advertised with return to home. This is probably one of the most interesting spots for an SD card. One of two things I don't like about this. One, it's sort of a pain in the neck and inconvenient. If I want to get the SD card out in a hurry and put a new one in, I got to pull the battery out. Number two is as the battery gets hot, the SD card is going to get equally as hot because it's directly beneath the battery. I don't know if it's going to affect overall performance, but it's definitely something to give pause to. So I've had this drone about 72 hours and I've gotten about 6 or 7 flights in on it. And I'll tell you that the software on this drone is definitely far from complete. That is probably one of the biggest Achilles heels of these drones that are coming out in the market, is not the hardware, but it is the software. To download the iOS app, you have to go register so you can hook up to test flight, and then you're able to download the Parrot application. Now, Parrot has said it's going to be coming out eventually, but it's not quite ready yet. Also, another big downfall to Parrot is the fact that there are missing flight modes. And it's not because they're missing because they're not included. They want me to pay $17 for these flight modes. I'm sorry, Parrot, but you're not necessarily new to the drone space, but you haven't shown me anything in the prosumer line. Unless you're gonna go pick up my packages from Amazon, I'm not paying you $17 for a flight mode. That should just be included. Come on. Let's talk about the physical application though. The application's pretty decent. It's somewhat intuitive. It does give you a lot of granular controls over speed, the tilt, the pitch. So you can really control and dial in your drone to your personal taste or experience in flying. I think that portion does really well. It could be a little bit more polished. It does log and it does make you do mandatory updates. Immediately when I started up the drone, I had to do a mandatory update, which was sort of a bummer. It went pretty quick. It took about 10 minutes or so to process, but after that, I was good to roll. Let's talk about the camera on this drone because this is really the star element of this drone. It is a 21 megapixel camera. It is a compact sensor. It does have a 2.4 aperture on there. That is a fixed aperture, which means you can't adjust it in any way. It does have a neat trick up its sleeve as it's 180 degrees up or down, which is pretty cool, and it does feature lossless zoom, which does work pretty awesome if I had to say so myself. You got 2 flight modes in 1080p or 4K, 30 or 24 frames per second. There is a cinema mode, which only shoots in 24. There is 2 color profiles for this drone. You have natural, or you have, I guess, P-Log, which is like their version of D-Log, works pretty nice. And then for a bonus, there is also HDR. Now, in my testing, I found HDR to be very, very finicky and just really oversaturated, and it just doesn't look very good. So I would encourage you to leave it off. Not only that, exporting out HDR video is a little bit of a pain, I found. I don't know if anybody's tried it, but it is a little bit difficult to do. There is only one codec here, and it's saying that it's MP4. I wish there was MOV, but there's not. So it's MP4 is the codec that we have to work with. But I guess that's good enough, right? Now, Parrot was nice enough to include an SD card with the drone. It's a 16 gig SanDisk industrial SD card, but honestly, I would chuck it in the trash because the write speeds don't match the write speeds of the drone. The drone is writing up to 100 megabits per second in 4K, and the SD card they include, it's only good for 40. So if you want to get that crystal clear content, you're going to need to get yourself a decent SD card. I would suggest you getting like a SanDisk 32 gig or something. They're like 12 or 16 bucks on Amazon, and it is the extreme version, good for at least up to 60 megabits, which is definitely closer to that rated 100. Flying the drone is just interesting because the controller doesn't have dials to go in or out, which I felt would be more natural. It's actually more of a switch on each side of the controller. You have a switch to control your zoom, and then you have a switch to control the pitch of your gimbal. Now that gimbal is also stabilized 3-axis, but the 3rd axis is actually stabilized in software. In my testing, I felt like it was pretty stable, but you be the judge and take a look at this footage. Now, initially when I saw that 180 degree gimbal, I was like, wow, there's so many application reasons why I would use this. But honestly, with the lack of obstacle avoidance, I don't trust myself getting close enough to subjects in which I would be directly underneath. I think a huge miss for Parrot is not including any form of obstacle avoidance. On this drone, there are only 2 sensors. You have a sonar sensor and a vision positioning sensor that faces straight down. That's it. I did notice a couple of times when firing on the drone, it sort of drifted all around, and you just have to really sort of feather it to bring it back in. I don't recommend this drone if you are a new pilot. I may get a lot of hate for that, but I don't recommend this drone if you are a new pilot. I don't. And that's more or less because the vision position is sort of wonky, and without the lack of obstacle avoidance, it's going to be an interesting task for a new pilot. The drone does feel pretty durable. I did see some reviews where people have crashed them and they came out unscathed. Billy actually said at the event he went to, this thing actually hit the wall demo in one of their smart modes, almost hit him, and was totally, capable of flying after they fired it back up. So if that means anything to you, it sounds like it's pretty durable, but I wouldn't want to be the person that pushes the boundaries. There is a cap on the camera. It's sort of weird. It's not like a gimbal guard. It's just sort of a lens cap. I could just see that also getting lost eventually at some point. But other than that, it seems to be decent-ish. However, let's talk about the transmission signal for a moment. I was basically back out by the tower, and if you've watched my channel enough, you'll know that I like to take my drones out there to do my comparison shots because it is the most consistent way for me to consistently test each drone and see how they're going to do. And it didn't do well. If you look at the controller, you'll see it stuttering and lagging. I never physically had problems controlling it, but the video feed was very, very laggy, and I tried to change channels and what have you, and it just wasn't happening. So be that as may, that's a big deal for me, is having consistent video signal. The few parlor tricks that it does offer really don't outweigh the fact that it's missing some key components. Obstacle avoidance is huge. A decent controller that can mount almost any phone is huge. And the ability to have a consistent and steady transmission signal is a big one, and one that I really can't overlook. Will I keep this drone? Probably not. This will probably be my first and last impression of this drone. I'm sorry, but $699, I think for $100 more, you can probably just get yourself a Mavic Air. I know a lot of people are just hell-bent on not buying DJI products, but if it really came down to that, spend a little bit more or wait a little bit and see if the Evo price drops, or just pony up and buy the Evo if you absolutely don't want a DJI product. That's my best suggestion for you. But if you are an experienced, seasoned pilot who wants a different angle or perspective on their video footage, then yeah, absolutely. The Anafi would be the best choice for you. It has a 2.1 mile range, 2.4 mile range. Again, there are some caveats, and maybe that will change as software comes out or they make some improvements. But as of right now, I don't think the Anafi is enough. Not enough for me to overlook like the Mavic Air. But anyways, that's gonna do it for this video. Take a look at the footage, really look through it and think about it. Again, I've flown a couple of different drones and I've had a couple of different Parrot drones previously to this. I mean, this is a great improvement, but it's not quite there. It was a nice try to get into that prosumer market, but I think they could have did better. Let me know what you guys think in the comments section below. Anyways, that's going to do it for this video. Stay original.
I have my issues, problems with trust. You were the problem, to you I was dust. I could smell trouble from miles away, but now I'm different, yeah, I'm okay. You had your reasons, you did your best, but the one you needed was someone else. I sat there waiting for you to change, then I realized you're not the one for me.